July 17, 1944, 0622, Keflavik Airfield, Iceland. The B-29 Superfortress came in trailing smoke from its number 4 engine. 4 massive radial engines, but only 3 were singing. The 4th coughed black smoke across the pale Arctic sky. It touched down hard. Rubber screamed against concrete. The wounded bomber rolled for 3,000 feet before stopping 200 yards from the runway's end. 10 crewmen evacuated in 40 seconds. Fire crews extinguished the blaze in 3 minutes. The base commander was on the scrambler phone to London within 4 minutes. London connected to Washington within 6. Washington's reply came in 12 minutes. One word: destroy. But 12 minutes is a long time when you're racing against intelligence. And German intelligence had been listening.
The message reached Berlin at 1341 Central European Time. 6 words intercepted from British wireless: American super bomber grounded, repeat grounded. By 1800 hours, a courier knocked on a modest apartment door in Dessau. Ernst Richter, 42 senior airframe engineer at Junkers Dessau, answered. The courier handed him sealed orders: report to Tempelhof Airfield by 0400 hours. Pack for 1 week, cold weather. Ernst opened the envelope. 3 paragraphs. The third was 1 sentence. Objective is examination and assessment of captured American B-29 Superfortress aircraft. His hands started shaking. 14 years he'd built aircraft for the Reich. Started as a draftsman in 30, senior engineer by 35, leading stress analysis by 39. He was good at his work, meticulous, patient, the kind of engineer who measured twice and cut once. But the war had changed everything. No time for patience now. Designs rushed.
Materials substituted. Quality control abandoned. The aircraft rolling off the line weren't the machines he'd designed. They were approximations, compromises, shadows. His wife had died in the Dresden bombing 1943. His son flew Focke-Wulf 190s somewhere on the Eastern Front. The last letter had arrived 5 weeks ago. The enemy is everywhere, father. We do our best, but there are so many of them. So many of them. Ernst packed methodically. 2 changes of clothes, Swiss calipers with precision vernier scale, micrometer set, graph paper pencils, slide rule, 3 notebooks with numbered pages, Leica camera, 4 rolls of film, a wool sweater his mother had knitted before the war. He lay on his bed without sleeping, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what he might see tomorrow. At 0330, he rose and carried his suitcase downstairs. A Kubelwagen waited, engine idling in pre-dawn darkness.
Tempelhof Airfield sprawled across southern Berlin, a transit hub for wounded and desperate aircraft coming and going at all hours. Ernst was directed to Hangar 7, where 2 other men waited beside a Ju-290 transport. The first was tall, maybe 35, wearing a Luftwaffe flight suit with lieutenant's insignia. He extended his hand. Lieutenant Klaus Weber, test pilot, Rechlin, Proving Grounds. Klaus had a firm grip and the easy confidence of someone who'd never lost at anything that mattered. The second man was older 60s, carrying a battered briefcase. Herr Vogel, technical documentation. Do either of you know what we're actually doing? Ernst asked. Klaus grinned. Going to Iceland to examine an American super bomber. Should be quite interesting. How long do we have? 48 hours, maybe less. The British are holding the site, but the Americans want it destroyed.
48 hours to analyze an entire aircraft. You can sleep when you're dead, Richter. Klaus clapped his shoulder. Wheels up in 20 minutes.
The Ju-290 lifted into pre-dawn darkness. Ernst sat by a window watching Germany fall away below. Berlin was a smudge dotted with fires. Then clouds swallowed everything. Klaus sat across from him, relaxed. So, what do you think we'll find? I don't know. Come on. You're the expert. What are the Americans capable of? Ernst considered. They have resources we don't. Raw materials, industrial capacity. But do they have skill, engineering tradition? That's why we're going. Klaus leaned back. I'll tell you what I think. We'll find a big lumbering bomber held together with American optimism and cheap aluminum. Impressive from a distance, but crude up close. The Americans are good at mass production, sure. Tanks, trucks. But precision aircraft, that requires something they don't have. What's that? Culture.
Heritage. Craftsmanship. You can't teach in a factory.
Ernst turned back to the window. Nothing but grey clouds. They flew northwest for 9 hours, refueling once in Norway at a captured airfield. The ground crew looked exhausted, moving like ghosts. British bomb us every 3rd night, the crew chief said. We fill craters during the day. They make new ones at night. Iceland appeared through coastal fog, a rocky moonscape of black sand and green moss. Keflavik materialized below a grid of runways carved into volcanic rock. They touched down hard at 04:15 July 20th. 21 hours since the B-29 had landed. 27 hours left before destruction. Waiting on the tarmac was a British officer, mid-30s, RAF insignia expression of deep skepticism. Klaus saluted. "Lieutenant Weber, Luftwaffe. We're here to inspect the American aircraft." The officer returned the salute without enthusiasm. "Sergeant Duncan MacLeod, RAF Technical Liaison."
I'm your minder for the next 36 hours. 36? We were told 48. Plans changed. Demolition team arrives 0600 on the 22nd. That's 36 hours from now. Not negotiable. He cut off Klaus's protest. "And I'll be watching everything. You take no parts. You remove no components. You photograph only what I approve. Break these rules, you're on the next plane home. Clear?" "Clear," Ernst said quietly. Duncan looked at him properly. Something like professional respect beneath the hostility. "You Richter?" "Yes." "Heard about you. They say you designed the Ju-88 wing structure." "I was part of the team. Good aircraft. Tough. We've had to shoot down enough of them." He gestured toward a jeep. "Come on, your bomber's waiting." They drove across the airfield in silence. The wind carried salt and sulfur. And then Ernst saw it. Hangar 12, massive corrugated steel doors open. Framed in that opening, lit by pale Arctic sun, was the B-29 Superfortress. Ernst stopped walking. Klaus stopped beside him. Mein Gott! The aircraft was enormous. Wings stretching halfway across the hangar. Fuselage fat and round like a whale's body, tapering to a tall vertical stabilizer reaching toward the rafters. 4 massive engines in streamlined nacelles. Even damaged, even marked with fire and emergency landing, it radiated brutal elegance. "That's not a bomber," Klaus whispered. "That's a flying fortress." Duncan pulled up beside them. "Actually, the fortress is the B-17. This is something else. Come on." They walked inside. Ernst couldn't move his eyes from the aircraft. The skin was polished aluminum, unpainted except for markings. The panels were huge, far larger than anything on German aircraft. Rivets flush, barely visible, arranged in perfect rows. "You have 2 hours for initial assessment," Duncan said. "Then we break for food. Back at 0800 work until 2200. Ernst was already walking forward, hand reaching out. He touched the wing. The metal was cold, smooth, smoother than anything he'd ever felt on an aircraft. He ran his palm across the surface, feeling for seams, for joints between panels. Nothing. His hand traveled 2 feet, 3, 4. The surface was continuous, unbroken, impossibly seamless. "Klaus, come here." Klaus joined him. Ernst guided his hand to the wing. "Feel this. Tell me what you feel." "It's smooth. Very smooth. Now find the seam between panels." Klaus searched, fingers probing. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. There's no seam." "Exactly." Ernst pulled out his folding ruler. He measured the span. 18 feet. 18 feet of continuous aluminum with no joints, no welds, no seams. He turned to Duncan. "How? Hydraulic press. 10,000 tons. Maybe more." Ernst did the math. Junkers had an 800-ton press, the largest in Germany. Maximum panel length 6 feet. This was 18. To form this required a press 25 times more powerful than anything Germany possessed. "We don't have machinery like that," he said. "No," Duncan agreed. "You don't." Klaus had moved to the engine, running hands over the cowling. "Richter, look at this." Ernst joined him. The panels fit together with impossible tolerances. The fasteners were flush-mounted, perfectly aligned, and on each fastener head stamped into the metal was a number. 72 foot-pounds, Klaus read. "What does that mean?" "Torque specification. This bolt should be tightened to exactly 72 foot-pounds. Why stamp it on the bolt? So anyone can service it. You don't need to remember. You don't need training. You just read the number and tighten to spec." Klaus laughed uncertainly. "They don't trust their mechanics." Duncan spoke up. "Wrong way to think about it." They don't need to trust their mechanics. The system does the thinking." Ernst moved to the next engine and the next. Every bolt stamped, every fastener labeled, torque specs, retorquing intervals, all stamped directly into the hardware. "This isn't an aircraft," he murmured. "This is a machine designed to be maintained by people who don't need to understand it." Klaus found the crew ladder and climbed up, disappearing into the forward hatch. Vogel photographed everything, camera clicking steadily. Ernst pulled out his notebook and started writing. Observations, measurements, questions, the pages filled with numbers and sketches. "You're not what I expected,"
Duncan said. What did you expect? Someone looking for ways to prove German superiority. Ernst kept writing. I'm a scientist. Ideology doesn't change measurements. That's good, because what you're measuring here is going to tell you things you don't want to hear. Klaus's voice echoed from inside. Richter, you need to see this. Ernst climbed through the forward hatch. The interior was dim, lit by light through small windows. As his eyes adjusted, he saw what Klaus was staring at. The cabin was pressurized. You could tell by the sealed bulkheads, thick windows, complex conduits. But what struck Ernst wasn't the engineering. It was the seats. They were padded, actually padded with cushions and adjustable backs, reading lights above each position, heating vents, even cup holders. It's comfortable, Klaus said, sounding offended. Ernst ran his hand along the pilot's seat. The padding was thick, supportive, controls arranged ergonomically, instruments backlit. In German bombers, crews froze at altitude, wore heavy leather and still got frostbite, sat on bare metal or thin canvas. But the Americans had made comfort standard. They're not trying to build heroes, Ernst said quietly. They're trying to build survivors. He moved to the instrument panel. Behind it he could see the wiring, and what he saw made him stop breathing. The wires were color-coded. Red, black, yellow, blue, green. Every wire a different color, wrapped in rubberized insulation bundled into neat looms. He'd spent 14 years on German aircraft. Every wire was black. You identified them by position. Master electricians memorized thousands of wire routes. Took years to train. Here you just followed the colors. A simple change, obvious. But no one in Germany had done it because they'd never needed to. They had master electricians. But what happened when your master electrician died? The knowledge died with him, unless you made the system remember for you. Ernst felt dizzy. He sat down in the co-pilot's seat because his legs wouldn't hold him. Klaus was examining the oxygen system. This is impressive, but it's still just an aircraft. We can build something similar. No, Ernst said. We can't. Why not? Because this isn't just an aircraft. It's the product of a system we don't have. Ernst pulled out a waterproof pouch from beneath the instrument panel. Inside was a technical manual bound in heavy canvas. Technical Order 0120EJ2, Maintenance Manual B29 Superfortress, 1,683 pages. He flipped through it. Every system documented, every wire numbered. Every component had a part number, removal procedure, replacement procedure, testing procedure, diagrams, photographs, specifications. Klaus, how many pages is the JU-390 maintenance manual? Klaus shrugged. Maybe 200. This has 1,700. Somewhere in America there are 30,000 mechanics who can read this and maintain this aircraft. We have maybe 500 technicians in all of Germany qualified for heavy bombers. When one dies, decades of knowledge die with him. He held up the manual. This is their advantage. Not skill, not genius, documentation, standardization. The systematic elimination of expertise as a bottleneck. They worked through the day and into the evening. The midnight sun gave them light long past when darkness should have fallen. Ernst measured rivet holes with his micrometer. Diameter 0.1562 inches. Every single one. Variance less than 0.0002 inches. Perfect. Identical. Machine drilled. He measured panel thickness. Photographed wiring. Sketched hydraulic systems. Examined gun turrets remote controlled by electric servos. Vogel's camera clicked steadily. At 2200 hours, Duncan called a halt. You need sleep. Back at 0600. They returned to temporary barracks, 3 cots in a cold room. Ernst lay awake staring at the ceiling. Numbers and measurements cycled through his mind. Every observation pointed to the same conclusion. The B-29 wasn't just a good aircraft. It was the logical result of a manufacturing system Germany didn't have and couldn't build. They were racing a competitor who'd already crossed the finish line. He thought about his son flying obsolescent aircraft. About young men at Junkers working 18-hour shifts to build bombers by hand while Americans stamped them out like automobile parts. And for the first time since 1939, Ernst Richter allowed himself to consider the possibility that Germany might not just lose. It might never have had a chance at all. Outside, the wind sang over volcanic rock, and the midnight sun painted long shadows across a country that belonged to neither side, where for 2 days one German engineer was being allowed to see the future, whether he wanted to or not. Day 2. Ernst woke at 0430. Klaus sat on his cot holding a photograph. My sister, Klaus said. Hamburg. Works in a munitions factory. 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. Gets bombed every few weeks. She asked me when it would be over. He looked at Ernst. I told her we were winning. I lied to my own sister. You told her what she needed to hear? No. I told her what I needed to believe, but after yesterday, after seeing that aircraft... Klaus put the photo away. I can't believe it anymore. The door opened. Duncan stepped in, water streaming off his coat. You're both awake. Good. We have a problem. Demolition team arrived early, scheduled to begin placing charges at 1400 hours today instead of tomorrow morning. Washington pushed up the timeline. He looked at Ernst. That gives you 10 hours. Not 14. 10 hours. Ernst felt something crack inside his chest. I need to see the aircraft, now. They ran through rain that felt like ice. Inside the hangar, water dripped through roof holes. The B-29 sat in half-light water streaming off its wings. Ernst went straight to work. Yesterday's color-coding discovery was just the beginning. Now he needed to understand how the system scaled across the entire aircraft. He traced wiring from nose to tail. Each wire had an alphanumeric tag, Wire Hotel 47 Juliet 12, Kilo 33. 5,000 wires, every one documented in that 1,700-page manual. Any mechanic can trace any circuit, he told Klaus. They've eliminated the need for master electricians. Duncan approached with a clipboard. Found something you should see. He led them to a panel exposing internal structure. Behind it was a metal plate riveted to a stringer. Boeing Aircraft Company, Plant Number 2, Renton, Washington. Manufactured March 17, 1944. Inspector number 4728. Ernst stared. Inspector 4728. Means they have at least that many inspectors, Duncan said. In one plant. Klaus looked between them. That can't be right. It's not possible for you, Duncan corrected. Ernst pulled out his notebook, hands shaking slightly. Inspector 47228 in one plant. Yonkers-Dessau had 12 inspectors total. 12 men responsible for quality control across an entire aircraft manufacturing facility. The Americans had nearly 5,000 in a single plant. He moved to examine the rivet holes more systematically. He needed data, evidence, proof that couldn't be dismissed. He measured 200 rivets across wing, fuselage and tail, every single one 0.1562 inches diameter, plus or minus 0.0002 inches. Perfect circles, perfect spacing, 0.875 inches, center to center, arranged in a perfect grid. Why measure rivets for hours? Klaus asked, impatient. Because these rivets tell me how they think. In Germany, each riveter has his own style. Spacing varies 2 to 3 millimeters. Here, machines punch holes. Every hole identical, every rivet interchangeable. Ernst examined the engine mounts. The entire power plant hung from 4 bolts. 4 massive bolts attaching to a steel firewall mount. The whole assembly engine and mount together could be removed as a unit. At Junkers, changing an engine required 2 days by a specialized crew. Dozens of connections, fuel lines, oil lines, hydraulics, electrical control cables, exhaust, each connection different, each requiring specific knowledge. Here, everything was standardized. Quick disconnect fittings, plug-type electrical connectors, standardized mounting points. It's modular, Ernst said. Self-contained units that can be quickly replaced. You don't repair in the field. You swap the broken module for a working one. Duncan nodded. They figured out early that field repairs are inefficient. Better to design for rapid replacement. Ernst thought about Luftwaffe maintenance. Aircraft spending weeks at forward airfields while mechanics improvised repairs. Engines rebuilt in tents while enemy fighters controlled the skies. The Americans had designed the problem out of existence. Duncan pulled out a folded paper. British intelligence. Summary of Boeing production facilities. He read, Plant 1, Wichita, Kansas. 31,000 workers, 3 shifts. Plant 2, Renton, Washington. 28,000 workers, 3 shifts. Plant 3, Marietta, Georgia. 34,000 workers, 3 shifts. Plant 4, Omaha, Nebraska. 26,000 workers, 3 shifts. The numbers hung in cold air like an accusation. Ernst calculated automatically. 4 plants. 119,000 workers, all building the same aircraft, all following the same procedures, using the same tools, reading the same manuals. Junkers-Dessau. 480 workers total. How many B-29s have they built? Ernst asked quietly. Duncan consulted his notes. As of June 1st, approximately 1,200 delivered. Production rate in June was 375 aircraft. They're projecting 500 per month by December. 500 per month. Ernst felt the ground tilt. 500 B-29s per month meant 16 per day. 1 aircraft completed every 90 minutes around the clock. Germany's entire bomber production, all types combined, was maybe 200 aircraft per month, on good months, when factories weren't being bombed. Klaus had gone pale. That's not possible. You can't build aircraft that fast. You can't, Duncan agreed. They can. Ernst walked away, needing space. The numbers were crushing something fundamental in his chest, some assumption about how the world worked. He found himself beneath the B-29's wing, looking up at the massive main spar, a single forged piece, not built up from smaller components. One continuous piece of aluminum alloy machined to precise dimensions. Making this required forging equipment Germany didn't possess. Machining it required tools they couldn't build. Installing it required assembly jigs they'd never designed. Every component told the same story. American manufacturing operated on a scale that made German industrial capacity look medieval. Time compressed. Ernst worked frantically, knowing every minute brought them closer to destruction. He documented everything, his notebooks filled with data that would form a report no one would want to read. At 11:30, the demolition team arrived, 6 men in American uniforms carrying crates of explosives. Their sergeant surveyed the aircraft with professional disinterest. "You boys need to clear out by 1300. We need 90 minutes to place charges." Ernst felt panic. "We need more time." "Don't have it. Orders are orders." Duncan intervened. "Give them until 12:30. Extra hour." The sergeant considered.
12:30, not a minute longer.
1 more hour. Ernst photographed bomb release mechanisms, measured landing gear struts, examined fuel tank construction. Every observation confirmed what he already knew, but he needed documentation, needed proof that couldn't be dismissed. At 12:15, Klaus stopped measuring and just stood beneath the wing. "It's beautiful. I hate that it's beautiful. Beauty is beside the point. It's effective. Is there a difference? In engineering, sometimes. But when you have the resources to make something both beautiful and effective, that's when you know you're dealing with a mature industrial power." In the bomb bay, someone had written a message in chalk on the door's interior. Neat handwriting. "To whoever finds this, we got hit by flak over France. Lost number 3 engine and hydraulics. Thought we weren't going to make it. But this bird brought us home. She's a good plane. Tough. Takes care of her crew. Treat her right. Lieutenant Morrison. AC May, 1944. Ernst stared at the message. Lieutenant Morrison, the aircraft commander who'd trusted his life to American engineering. "They trusted their machine," Klaus said quietly. "That's not the same as love, but it might be more important." At 12:25, Duncan touched Ernst's shoulder. "Time." Ernst looked at his notebooks, 4 of them filled with measurements and observations, 4 notebooks containing the future documented in graphite and paper. 2 more minutes. You have one." Ernst walked around the aircraft one last time. His hand traced the fuselage, feeling the smooth skin, the flush rivets, the precise panel gaps. He stopped at the nose where the serial number was stenciled. 4224891. Just a number. One aircraft among thousands. Replaceable. Interchangeable. That was the secret. American power didn't come from individual excellence. It came from the systematic elimination of individual importance. "Richter!" Duncan's voice was gentle but firm. "Now!" Ernst stepped away. Klaus and Vogel were already at the hangar entrance. The demolition team moved in with their crates. Outside, rain had softened to drizzle. Ernst turned to look back one last time. Through the open doors, he could see the B-29 still proud despite damage. The demolition team was placing charges on wing's fuselage tail. Methodical, efficient, American. "What happens now?" Klaus asked. "We go home, and we tell them the truth. Will they listen?" "No, but I'll tell them anyway." They flew out at 1600 hours. As the Ju-290 climbed and turned east, Ernst looked out the window. Below Keflavik airfield, the runway's small figures moving. Then a flash of light. The demolition charges detonated in sequence. Fire bloomed orange against grey sky. Smoke rolled up in thick columns. The aircraft that had taken 63 days to build ceased to exist in 6 seconds. Ernst watched until the smoke dissipated and there was nothing left to see. Then he opened his notebook and began writing his report. He wrote for 9 of the 11-hour flight home, stopping only when his hand cramped too badly to continue. He documented everything, every measurement, every observation, every conclusion. The final report was 47 pages. The last page contained his summary. The B-29 Superfortress represents an industrial capability gap of at least 10 years, possibly 15. Germany cannot close this gap through incremental improvement or increased effort. The American advantage is systemic, not individual. Manufacturing philosophy prioritizes production speed over theoretical perfection. Complete standardization enables unlimited scaling. Documentation eliminates dependence on expert knowledge. Design modularity minimizes maintenance time. Quality control through process, not craftsman skill. Germany's current approach requires resources we do not have and cannot obtain. Skilled workers cannot be trained faster than they are being lost. Manufacturing facilities cannot be protected from strategic bombing. Recommendation: German aviation strategy must accept quantitative disadvantage. We cannot match American production. We can only attempt to survive it. The B-29 is not simply an aircraft. It is evidence of an industrial methodology that has made traditional engineering craftsmanship obsolete. The future belongs to those who can manufacture perfection, not those who can design it. He signed it, dated it, closed the notebook.
Klaus, who'd been sleeping, woke as they crossed into German airspace. He looked out at the countryside below. Even from altitude, the damage was visible. Bombed railways, cratered roads, cities showing gaps like missing teeth. What will you tell them? The truth. They'll hate you for it. Probably. Will it change anything? Ernst was quiet for a long moment. No, the war is already over. We just haven't admitted it yet. They landed at Tempelhof at 0300 hours, July 23rd. A staff car took them to the Air Ministry. The building was damaged, one wing collapsed, but offices still functioned. Ernst was escorted to a conference room. He waited 2 hours. At 0533, officers entered. The senior officer, a colonel with Iron Cross, sat at the table's head. Herr Richter, your report. Ernst handed over the notebook. The colonel opened it, read the first page, flipped to conclusions. His face revealed nothing. This is defeatist. This is factual. Facts can be defeatist. You understand what you're saying? That German engineering is inferior? No. I'm saying German manufacturing capacity is insufficient. Our engineering is excellent. But engineering excellence is not enough when the enemy produces adequate aircraft in overwhelming numbers. A major spoke up. The Reichsmarschall will not accept this. He has stated repeatedly that 1 German aircraft equals 3 Allied aircraft. Then the Reichsmarschall is mistaken. Silence. You didn't contradict Goering in Berlin. The colonel stood slowly. You will revise this report, remove the defeatist conclusions, emphasize German superiority, and recommend production increases. I will not. That is an order. I am a civilian consultant. You cannot order me. Then you will be conscripted and ordered as a soldier. Ernst met his eyes. Then I will be a soldier who refuses an unlawful order. You can shoot me if you like, but you cannot make me lie about what I saw. The major moved toward him, but the colonel held up a hand. The only sound was a clock ticking. You're a fool, Richter. I'm a scientist. We have different priorities. The colonel picked up the notebook. I'm confiscating this. You will not discuss your findings with anyone. Return to Junkers and resume normal duties. This matter is closed. Keep the notebook, Ernst said. I have the measurements in my head. They dismissed him. Ernst returned to Dessau on a military train that took 14 hours to cover a journey that should have taken 4. Twice they stopped to clear debris from bombing raids. He arrived home at 1800 hours, July 24th. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Cold potatoes on the table, now covered in mold. He sat at his desk and wrote a letter to his son. He described Iceland, the volcanic landscape, the midnight sun. He didn't mention the B-29. He just asked if his son was eating enough, whether he was safe. Then he opened a fresh notebook and began rewriting his report from memory. Every measurement, every observation, every conclusion. If they wanted to suppress the truth, they'd have to work harder. He wrote through the night. The air raid sirens started at 0300. He ignored them and kept writing. Bombs fell somewhere east, shaking his windows. By dawn, he'd reconstructed 47 pages. Over the following days, he made 4 copies. One hidden behind books in his apartment, one in his office, one in a safety deposit box, one sent to his cousin in Switzerland with instructions to hold it until the war ended. Then he went back to work. The war ground on. Summer turned to autumn, autumn to winter. Allied armies closed in from east and west. Bombing intensified. Production declined. Workers disappeared. Materials became scarce. Ernst continued designing aircraft that would never be built in sufficient numbers. He continued calculating stress loads on structures that would be destroyed before they saw combat.
In January 1945, he received a letter. 3 lines. Father, they are sending us against the bombers tomorrow. The American ones. The big silver ones. I'm not afraid. Tell Mother I love her. Your son. Ernst read it 4 times before understanding. His son didn't know his mother was dead. The letter had been delayed, lost in postal chaos. He never received another letter.
3 weeks later, official notification arrived. Oberleutnant Richter killed in action January 29, 1945, during defensive operations against American bomber formations. No details, just the date and killed in action. Ernst kept the notification in his desk drawer next to the last letter. His son's hope. The military's certainty. He never learned which American bomber had shot his son down. Perhaps it had been a B-29, perhaps one built in the same factory by the same workers using the same processes he'd documented. The irony would have been too perfect. But it probably didn't matter. One bomber or another. One bullet or another. The mathematics were the same. His son had been irreplaceable. The bombers were not. That was the difference that decided everything. On April 18, 1945, British tanks entered Dessau. Ernst was at his desk at Junkers when he heard shells impact the factory walls. He calmly closed his notebook, put on his coat, and walked outside. A British soldier stopped him with a rifle. "Hands up!" Ernst raised his hands. "I'm not armed. I'm an engineer." An officer approached. "Aircraft designer?" "Yes." "You're coming with us." They took him to a temporary headquarters in a commandeered school. A British intelligence officer interrogated him. The questions were technical, detailed, informed. After 2 hours, the officer leaned back. "You wrote a report, July 1944, about the B-29. We have it." Ernst felt something like relief. "How?" "Swiss intelligence passed it along. Your cousin." The officer smiled. "It's quite good. Accurate. Honest. Your own side tried to suppress it, but we found it very useful." "Useful how?" "Confirmation. We knew we had manufacturing superiority, but your report helped us understand that you knew it too, that your leadership was denying reality, made our strategic planning easier." Ernst said nothing. His report, written to warn Germany, had instead helped the enemy. "What happens to me now?" "Prisoner of war, technically. But we need engineers, people who understand aircraft manufacturing. War's almost over. After that, there's rebuilding. You interested? Do I have a choice?" "Everyone has choices. You chose to write the truth when lying would have been safer. That's worth something." The war ended 3 weeks later. Ernst was released in June and returned to Dessau. The city was destroyed. The factory was rubble. His apartment building stood, but his apartment had been looted. Everything gone except the copy of his report hidden behind books. He found work as a consultant for British occupation assessing German aviation facilities. Every factory damaged, every tool destroyed, every worker scattered. In 1948, the Marshall Plan began. American money flowed into Germany. New factories were built. Americans brought their methodology with them. Ernst was hired to help design a new aircraft manufacturing facility in Augsburg. The Americans insisted on their approach. Assembly lines, standardized tooling, comprehensive documentation, process control. Everything the B-29 had taught him was now being implemented in Germany. One day, walking through the new factory, Ernst stopped at a riveting station. A young German worker, maybe 20, was using a pneumatic rivet gun. The spacing was perfect, the depth consistent. The worker had been trained for 2 weeks. An American supervisor stood nearby, checking work against a printed specification sheet. "Good work, Hans. Next panel." Ernst thought about craftsmen at Junkers who'd taken years to master their skills, men who'd died in bombing raids or been conscripted or given up when the war made their expertise irrelevant. This young worker would never have their skill, but he didn't need it. The system provided the skill. "Herr Richter." Ernst turned. A man in civilian clothes stood behind him. American, maybe 45, with confident bearing. "My name is David Morrison. I understand you examined one of our B-29s. In Iceland 44. Ernst stared. "Morrison, serial 4224891. You wrote the message in the bomb bay." Morrison looked surprised, then pleased. "You saw that I was the original aircraft commander. We flew her on 3 combat missions over France in May. Then I was rotated stateside for instructor duty. They assigned a new crew." He paused. "When I heard she'd gone down in Iceland on a ferry flight..." He didn't finish. "The new crew survived the landing," Ernst said quietly. "Your aircraft protected them to the end." "That's something, at least." Morrison extended his hand. "I'm helping set up this factory. Could use someone with your knowledge, someone who understands both approaches, German precision and American efficiency." Ernst shook his hand.
I thought we lost. You did, but the war's over. Now comes the harder part, building something better than what we destroyed. Years passed. The factory grew. German aviation rebuilt itself on American principles, modified by German attention to detail. By 1955, the facility produced aircraft for Lufthansa. Ernst, now 53, worked as senior technical advisor. He trained young engineers. He reviewed designs. He ensured quality. One morning, he received an invitation. Hanover Air Show, Boeing demonstrating their new 707 jet airliner. As a consultant to German aviation, Ernst was invited. The air show was held in late May, clear and warm. Thousands attended. Ernst wandered through displays looking at aircraft from a dozen nations. Jets, now not propeller-driven planes. At 1400 hours, the announcement came. Ladies and gentlemen, the Boeing 707. Ernst watched from the crowd as the aircraft approached. Silver like the B-29, larger, sleeker, swept wings instead of straight, 4 jet engines instead of radials. But beneath the different shape, the philosophy was the same. Standardization, modularity, systematic design for mass production. The 707 passed overhead at 500 feet, engines whispering. Graceful, powerful, inevitable. Ernst felt tears on his cheeks. Beautiful, isn't she? An elderly man stood beside him wearing a veteran's ribbon. American. Yes, Ernst said in English. Beautiful. I worked on the B-29 program. Wichita plant. Welder. Did my part. The man smiled. My grandson works at Boeing now. Engineering. Says they're going to build 1,000 of these. They probably will. You German? Yes. You guys make good cars now. Mercedes, Volkswagen. Learned from us, I guess. Ernst almost laughed. Yes, we learned from you. The 707 completed its display and flew toward the horizon. The crowd applauded. Ernst clapped along, celebrating an aircraft built by the nation that had defeated his own using principles he'd documented 11 years ago in a notebook no one wanted to read. That evening, back in his apartment in Munich, Ernst took out the last remaining copy of his B-29 report. He read through it, pages, yellowed ink, fading. 247 pages, every measurement still accurate, every conclusion still valid. On the final page, he wrote one more paragraph. Postscript, May 1955. The war ended 10 years ago. Germany rebuilt using American methods. We now produce aircraft efficiently in quantity with standardized processes. I touched the B-29 and saw the future. I wrote this report to warn Germany. I failed to change anything. But perhaps failure was the point. Some truths cannot be learned through warning. They must be learned through defeat. The Americans did not beat us with superior courage. They beat us with superior systems, with manufacturing processes that eliminated the human variable, with documentation that made expertise unnecessary, with standardization that made scaling unlimited. I spent my career believing in the supremacy of the skilled engineer. The B-29 taught me that systems matter more than individuals, that replaceability beats irreplaceability, that adequate quality produced in quantity defeats perfection produced in scarcity. Some prophecies are not meant to prevent the future. They are meant to explain it after it arrives. I was not a prophet. I was a witness. And sometimes that is enough. He signed it, dated it, placed the report in a wooden box along with his tools from Iceland, the micrometer, the calipers, the notebooks. Tomorrow he would donate them to the Deutsches Museum. Let future generations see the instruments used to measure their own obsolescence. But tonight he poured a glass of schnapps and raised it toward the window, toward the sky, where the 707 had flown. To the future, he said quietly, whether we're ready for it or not. 20 years later, in 1975, a young aerospace engineering student visited Ernst. The student was writing a thesis on pressurized aircraft cabins. He'd found Ernst's name in obscure archives. Herr Richter, is it true you examined a B-29 in 1944? Ernst, now 73, nodded slowly. For 2 days, in Iceland. What was it like? Ernst thought about that question. What was it like to touch the future, to measure your own obsolescence, to document the weapon that would defeat everything you'd spent your life building? It was like holding a mirror, he said finally, and seeing that you were already a ghost. The student didn't understand. Not then. Perhaps he never would. But Ernst had learned that some truths can only be understood in hindsight after the future has already become the past. He died in 1979 quietly in his sleep. His tools were in the museum by then. His report had been declassified and published. His name appeared in footnotes about wartime intelligence. The B-29 he'd examined had been destroyed in 1944. But the lesson it taught lived on. Systems beat genius. Abundance beats perfection. The future belongs to those who can manufacture it. And sometimes the prophet's only reward is to be proven right after it no longer matters. Ernst Richter understood that, and in the end, understanding was enough.